Well, it's early Saturday morning. I've been editing a video I'm going to put out tomorrow morning about our antics trying to produce sourwood honey this year. It's been a very interesting year, and I've got a couple comments lately on my YouTube video about sourwood honey and how's it going, and even had a fellow comment from Texas saying, he didn't see what the big hype was about sourwood, and felt like his Texas wildflower was probably as good or better. And yeah, not everybody thinks that sourwood honey is the best honey, but I thought I'd try to explain why we work so hard to get it. First off is the value. It's worth quite a bit more than normal wildflower. This year will be different. I haven't really figured out what I'm going to charge for sourwood this year yet. Last year, if you were able to buy sourwood by the truckload, bulk in a barrel, it would have cost you $6.50, possibly $7.50 a pound. Whereas generic or just good table grade wildflower would have gone for more like $2.65, perhaps $2.85 a pound. Big difference. And then when you look at it at the retail point, it's even a bigger spread. So why is that? Sourwood is only produced, I won't say only, but the vast majority of it is produced in the southern Appalachian Mountains, which is where we're at. That would be North Georgia, kind of north central, northeast Georgia, where we live, and then just over the border into western North Carolina, parts of Virginia, parts of Kentucky, parts of Tennessee, and although it grows as far south as Mobile, Alabama, it's not produced there. It's very elevation sensitive. Our yards range from our lowest being 1,380 feet elevation to our highest one being about 2,380 elevation. The sweet spot for sourwood production, in my view, is probably between 1,600, 2,400, 1,800 to 2,200 being a little more defined. I have a friend by the name of Jack Hanel. He used to be the Western North Carolina bee inspector, and he had seen a lot of bee yards and a lot of sourwood crops, and his opinion was that the very sweetest spot for sourwood production always fell between 1,800 and 2,200 feet. He said he saw big crops, higher and lower, but the very best, the very biggest, always fell in that range. That's where about 75% of our yards are. We're in a really good situation here where we can produce sourwood honey. Sourwood honey is really tricky. That's part of the problem. There's really a big supply and demand problem. Sourwood honey is in high demand because it's only produced in this part of the world. You don't see it anywhere else. And most people that taste it think it's either one of the best honeys they've ever tasted or the best honey they've tasted. Now, when somebody comments that they don't really see the big deal and that the hype is ridiculous, my first question to them is, where did you get it? In our region, I would say at least 50% of the honey that's on the market, in produce stands, markets, gift shops, and so on, is not sourwood honey. And I know where most of it's coming from. It's a shame something can't be done about it. There's a huge amount of honey coming off the Western North Carolina farmers market in Asheville, North Carolina, that's labeled as sourwood, that has nothing to do with sourwood at all. There's not a drop of sourwood in it. Yet that's been going on for decades and nobody seems to be able to stop it. I don't know if it'd fall under mislabeling laws or what. By law, or the general rule is that if something is 51% or greater of a certain variety, it's okay to call it that. In the case of sourwood, if you only have 51%, in my view, it's kind of hard to call it that because you really have lost that sourwood essence. We've only had our sourwood tested twice, and both times, interestingly enough, it came up 93% both times. That's a pretty high percentage. Now, the other thing, let me back up. Most of the honey that's mislabeled as sourwood that I know of is being packed in the state of Tennessee. I won't mention names. Most beekeepers in this region watching this probably know who I'm talking about. And also another large packer in Virginia. Not only can you get sourwood honey that's not sourwood, but you can, if you want black locust, they can give you black locust. If you want clover, they can give you clover too. It's funny how it looks the same and tastes the same, but yeah, anything you want, they got it. Anyway, I'll get off of that soapbox now. In our area, in the southern Appalachians where we live, the soil can be very different, just 10, 20, 50 miles, up the road. Even in our own region, the locations that we use for our sourwood yards, we see a big variety of color and flavor. Our yards run across along Highway 441 south to north from down in Habersham County, which is near Clarksville, Georgia, and just barely out of the mountains all the way up to near Franklin, North Carolina. And it's about a 40-mile drive. And the southern yards, it's darker, it doesn't taste quite as good. And when we get up to our higher elevations in our northern yards, it's definitely different. Our sourwood honey is much different than even the surrounding counties. Towns County, which is just to our west, generally has sourwood that's lighter in color than ours. And the first few years I was producing sourwood, I thought maybe I was doing something wrong, and eventually I figured out that it really just comes down to soil type. Our soil is a little different here. Our sourwood has a little different flavor. It's darker in color. In fact, the sourwood that we produce is generally darker than almost anybody else's that I know of, but it has that sourwood flavor. It's really good. It's very rare that we get water white sourwood. It's usually extra light amber in a jar, which really, extra light amber is not really that light. I don't have a sample here in front of me, but it definitely tastes like sourwood. Now, back to this idea that it's, many people don't think it's the best honey. A good example is my wife, Suzette. Her favorite honey is tulip poplar. She just loves tulip poplar, that dark, rich, molassesy flavor of tulip poplar. My favorite honey is sourwood. But I'll give you one fact that I think is going to kind of paint the picture for you. I have a really good friend by the name of Virginia Webb. Very nice lady, very good at showing honey. She's got probably more ribbons than anybody I know. She's probably got more ribbons than anybody on the planet, honestly. I asked her, how many ribbons do you have? And she said, I don't know. I'm going to try to interview her this winter and get more information about her. I think the viewers would find her fascinating. She has entered her sourwood honey into the contest for best honey in the world over at Apimondia, if I'm pronouncing that right. And she's entered it 5 times and won the best honey in the world 4 times out of 5. So that has to say something. And I feel the same about sourwood honey. Virginia, by the way, her honey house is only about 25 minutes from ours. She's really close, same region. And her honey tends to be a little darker also than some of the sourwoods found in other regions a little farther north and a little farther west. Anyway, excuse me. Let's see, what else could I say about sourwood before I move on to the rest of the video? In our store, we usually have 8 to 10, perhaps 11 or 12 varieties of honey to offer people. We have a tasting station where they can taste it, and sourwood is the best selling honey in our store. We have good honeys. We have black locust and tulip poplar and clover from South Dakota and gallberry and orange blossom and all these special honeys, but sourwood sells better than all of them. Again, not everybody that tastes it thinks it's the best. Obviously, we're selling the other honey too, but sourwood's the best seller. And another reason that it's really important to us is because in our retail store, we have a lot of people coming in here that are specifically looking for sourwood. They're stopping into our store looking for sourwood honey. So back to the idea of it being a real financial boost, it's important to us to try to have that on hand. This year has been really, really weird. We've got probably around 40 bee yards, and at this time, today's July 15th, I would say probably only 20% of our yards are making honey that I'd feel comfortable labeling as sourwood. We're going to have a lot of sourwood-ish honey. A lot of our yards have sourwood / clover, slash other things, but I won't be able to call it sourwood because it's not going to be that very distinct sourwood flavor. There's too much other things in it. As part of actually that's part of the problem of coming into our region, dropping off bees to make sourwood honey, come back 3 weeks later and hope that's what you got. It's really, really tricky to nail the date. This year, the locations that are making sourwood are running about 7 days late. If you would have brought your colonies up here from Florida or South Georgia and just dropped them off in the hopes of getting sourwood, you'd already have a bunch of other stuff in your supers before the sourwood even started. And I also know that a lot of beekeepers that do that will go ahead and sell it as sourwood and label it as sourwood, and there's a lot of sourwood in it, but it's not quite as good as living here and really going through the effort of trying to keep it separated. And in the video that's going to come after this, you'll see just what we go through to try to keep it separate. It's a big task. It's frustrating. Sometimes you do all that work and you don't get any sourwood. 2 years ago, we made 0 sourwood after doing all the work to keep it separate. And so it can be frustrating in that respect, but it's worth the gamble. It's worth the work, in my view, because it's really part of what's made me successful as a commercial beekeeper in this area.